So Job benefited from God in his own personal development, and the value that he made to society included the welfare of his family and the welfare of his business and his own life that he was experiencing, and how people who came around him benefited in equal experience, translating into the abundance that they were also making in their own lives. So this is a success formula. Success fronts from the inspiration that God gives us to our own personal development. And then through our personal development, we can act on our relationships to get the value that we want from life. So success, making success, is quite simple. It's as simple as taking the direction or the leadership of God in receiving the ideas that are right for your own upkeep and for your own development. Dream, have a goal, and let God, the inspiration that you are receiving from grace, build your character or build your attitude to that sustainable attitude, build your discipline, build your habits, and build all those things that you need to build in order to make value of yourself. Because you couldn't make a good relationship with anyone if you yourself were not properly placed to accept other people. Now let us look at failure. So we understand that Job offered the sacrifice because he was afraid for his family. Now it is because of this fear that he was beginning to get more anxious and become uncertain about his future. And this anxiety and uncertainty is what landed him in the chaos that resulted in his failure. So in simple terms, when he wrote, he said in Job chapter 5 verse 25 to 26, he said that for the thing which I greatly feared is come upon me. The fear was that his children may curse God, that he may lose his health, and that his business could collapse. And that fear was what opinion threw at him. And he considered it indeed to begin to even assess them as a fear. Because formerly they were no fears to him, because he did not listen to opinions after then. After then, when he opened up the door for Satan to come and destabilize his reasoning and land him in this kind of confusion and disorder that is creating his failure. So for most of us, like Job, oftentimes we take in opinion for what we want to do. So you want to do something great, perhaps you have a dream in your mind that you want to fulfill, you want to achieve. You take the opinion that you need to go through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 ways. And then opinion gives you a standard to look yourself up to. And perhaps the standard requires you to have some resources which you do not have to get there. So still the same, opinion is training you to accept certain things which you did not know you needed to get where you want to be. Much the same way, whilst you had this dream, and if you had begun to develop yourself in the composition or the necessities that your dream needs in building the right attitude of mind and building the right attitude to follow suit in developing your potentials into that sharpness that dream requires you to be sharp with, you could still the same reach there even without knowing you were there in the first place. Because the idea is that God never gives us dreams or purposes in life that are hard to accomplish. He gives us purposes that are within our means to accomplish. And if it's within your means, it just means it's something you do every day. It's something that is associated with you doing every day. I mean, it does not mean you have to go through the whole entire academic ladder before you can fulfill your dream. In fact, you do not need to do any of that. All you need to do is to train yourself to deliver on that dream that you are hoping to accomplish. Whatever you want, train yourself to deliver it. And when you know how to deliver it, you will start seeing the demand that will come to you in fulfillment of that dream. Shortcut to success is building your own character or developing your personality to the standard or equivalent of the success that you seek. So for Job, opinions came to change his character or came to shape his character. Then of course, instead of focusing on the things he knew how to do, on building up his excellence to perfection, he changed that vision into another thing. So in effect, opinion came to shape his vision or reshape his vision onto another direction. And now when he saw that where he was now heading was unfamiliar to him, fear set in. And because of that fear, anxiety kicked itself in. And that is what resulted in his chaotic action. All of a sudden, he had too much to do. And now he needed to offload some to other people. He needed to leave a chunk of it to other people he didn't even know how to focus on. And then that is how Satan entered into his family to break it apart and to break himself down. Because now he was not following the principle of his success, he was now following the principle or the opinion of the world's form or acceptable means or form of success. So now when we go back to the scriptures to read from Job chapter 3 verses 25 to 26, then also we'll read 34 and 35 and then chapter 16 verse 4 to 5 and then 22. Now when you read these chapters or these verses, you realize that after Job has said that the things which he greatly fear are those that have come upon him, he was trying to say that now look guys, I'm not ignorant of the causes of my failure. I know exactly how I have failed and I know exactly what I need to do to be successful. He wanted to tell them that look, there is a principle for my success, and by that principle I need to relive and not to slack or to stay back. But his friends did not understand that, as many of us do not understand today, even today, that there's a principle to your health, there's a principle to your wealth, there's a principle to your success, there's a principle to everything that you do in this life. There's nothing that is random. Everything is in perfect order as God has made it. And this is where his friends attack him and calls him that he is proud, he is not being humble to the cause, and he is not being humble to the circumstances around him, as obviously many of us will do. We will always bow to the chief or to the man that is determining 5 or 10 people's circumstance of life around us, so that we equally get the same favor. Now Job refuses to do that because he says that look, yeah, I may do it, but even if I do it, I know what is going to end me in. It's not going to help me shape up my character to meet up with the success that is coming. Then obviously I will fail again. But in order to sustain myself in success, I need to develop myself. And that does not include your opinions or whatever you guys are trying to tell me. And that's where Elihu jumps in to say that look, Job is right to a certain extent and you guys are also right to a certain extent. But for Job, this was a time for growth. Whilst they were arguing profusely around him, trying to condemn him and all that, it was for himself a test of character, the building up of himself that look, I have decided, I have determined that this is not part of the requirement for me to meet my end goal. So I am not giving any more ear to these things that anybody is saying. So at a point he tells his friend, you are all bad friends. You are bad friends because instead of you understanding my position and advising or keeping my faith up on the direction I need to go, you're all trying to change my direction. You're all trying to get me to shift from where I need to be. You're all trying to tell me, no, it's not good again to be there. You forget that my dream is what leads me. It's not what your opinions are. Your only importance to your friends is to help them shape their own vision and to shape their own dreams, not to get them to change it. That's what his friends are trying to do over here. Alright, at this point, something interesting is happening here. And I want you to open your ears and follow me in this part of the series. So, everything that we have discussed so far, to a point we see that God comes in to intervene or talk to Job, and we see what that happens, the argument over there, and Job, who is this that darknet cancer, and all those kind of imposition of power that happens there. Now what really is happening here is just an emphasis. Everything that you see there in God challenging good is just for emphasis. For the emphasis that his friends have already done all that God is now saying. So the writer paints the emphasis of the power behind the opinions that are influencing Job or challenging Job to the core. So he wants you to understand that the principalities and the powers, the forces of darkness that are challenging your direction of life is not just mere. It's not mere. It's not something you should just take for granted in the sense that these are opinions, cast them out. Look, sometimes you hear something just at the back of your ears, and a few days down the line, you are doing the same thing. So so the writer is trying to paint the power, the emphasis in this voice, in these opinions by the voice of God. So you see that the argument that God, or the challenge that God throws to Job is obviously not God, is obviously not characteristic of God to do that. Then of course we all know that when God asks you a question, you cannot refuse to answer. But in this case, Job stayed silent. He did not answer. Much the same, by the same explanation we have given, that when opinions took center stage, at this time when Job knew that he didn't need to follow suit in the direction that opinion was granting him, he stayed silent. So at this point, the emphasis is that this is the power that was fighting against Job to get Job to lead a different lifestyle or to follow suit in the paradigm of the world. This power comes in the form of our institutions. I mean, it's so wide in our religion and all those things. You are forced, or you will almost be ridiculed in the name of God if you did not do the status quo or to follow suit in that. And it's just a few people who come out of that circumstance and say that twice have you spoken, I have heard, I am not going to say a word because I know you. I know you carry the threat that you are claiming to have. Yes, if I go and stand in my church and I say, guys, what you're doing is wrong, I know the pastor has power. They can beat me up, they can cast me out, and they can do all sorts of things. I'd rather stay silent in that sense. That's what Job did. He knew that the paradigm had the authority and power to do what it wanted to do. But his own power was in silence. The silence that was going to drive his dream or his vision to be accomplished high above the powers of the environment that were around him or surrounding him at that time. So while this God talks to him kind of in the sense of the opinions, the power and the sense of opinion, rambling on at Job, he stays silent, not to flinch, not a word, because he knew what he was up to, and he was not giving up now to the judgment of Elihu sitting in the silence that was in, or the voice of Elihu sitting in the silent majority of the opinion that was talking at him. He knew that Satan was sitting there and was getting ready to pounce on him anytime he spoke. And that's the same thing Jesus did. He knew that if he had spoken when he was being dragged along, Satan will find something to influence his attitude and influence his outcome. But he stays silent, remain focused on the goal. The goal is not all that matters. The dream is all that matters. It's not the voices that is around us. So when we read through Job chapter 42 verses 3 to 6, we see something very interesting. That Job's response is questioning whoever is talking to him. He's questioning whoever is talking to him, that person is hiding counsel without knowledge. And of course, whilst he's confessing that he's saying things that are beyond his present interpretation, but are rather futuristic in his own form of ideas and in his own dream, that he's going to have answers to some of these things, he is trying to question whoever is challenging him or who is talking. But you see that at this point the writer breaks in there, and then they continue in verse 5 that Job responds, I have heard thee by the hearing of the ear, but now my eyes see thee. So these two statements, of course, when you go deep into it, you understand that these two statements are not continuous like that. Now he is claiming he now sees through the picture that is being painted, the opinions that are fighting against him, and now he can really paint it out and say that this is not the voice of God. And to this reason, he is repenting to his earlier or his first formula of life or his first principle of life, to lead in the way of wisdom, not to follow suit in these opinions that are clouding his judgment and mounting pressure on him to follow or toe the line. To this point, this is what this part is trying to say in Job's assessment. But then, because it's very shortened, it can be controversial. I admit it can be controversial, but then this is what it really means, that Job is differentiating between the voice and telling that voice that, look, you are not the person you are claiming to be. Now I know you, and now I am sure that what I was doing was right and I need to stick with it. So now I repent, going back to what I used to do. He's not repenting to go to accept the new thing that is coming. He's repenting of his progression, the mistakes that he has done resulting in his poverty. Now I am going back to the things that were bringing me to success. So this is what this one is trying to say over here. So right at this point, when the lie is now being revealed, here's what happens. Satan is now telling the guys, the opinion leaders or the society or the friends of Job, that, look guys, you are wrong. Job is right. Now, so therefore, you should now recognize that Job's repentance is not to the God voice that was rebuking him. It was to his earlier state of mind that was bringing him the success. Because now, all the opinion that was rebuking him is telling that opinion drivers that you are wrong. So what's important here I need you to do is ask the question, why does Satan not tell them to bring the sacrifice to Job, to offer the sacrifice for them? But he says that they should offer the sacrifice themselves and go back to Job. Now, Satan kind of knows that Job will not accept those sacrifices as his terms of his terms for empowering them. So he will not accept their kind of sacrifice for his terms of empowering them. But when Satan says, go to church, when you are afraid, you go to church, you run to church because you are afraid, the fear still remains at home. The pastor prays for you, but it's obvious and it's possible that the fear will come back driving at you again. That's exactly what Satan is trying to do here. He's not telling them that, look, offload your burdens, go to Job, whatever he tells you, do. Just like Mary said about Jesus, that whatever he tells you do, that's not what Satan is doing. He says that, do your own sacrifice, go to Job, let Job pray for you. And then I will accept Job. Now at this point, you recognize that it's the same thing about Job that is replaying itself out here. That if Job now prays for you, as in Job leads you through the right direction or the principles of life, then I can spare you. Otherwise, I'm going to touch you. By the same permissions that I ask of God at Job, I'm asking the same permissions from Job to touch you. So if Job wants me to touch you, he will also desist from you, or you will refuse to go to him. However, when you go to him or you listen to him, then I cannot touch you, because now Job has empowered you with the same power that he has to avoid my touch. So now Job is going to help them shape up their mind under the influence of wisdom, which prevents Satan from touching anybody. So in conclusion, what happens here is that Job replaces wisdom with opinion. That now comes to drive his development into failure instead of success. So naturally, God expects everyone to flow from wisdom, from the angle of wisdom, to develop themselves in the qualities they need to be sustained in their dreams and in their own visions and their own dreams. And that is how you create value for the external world, to experience the God factor in you, or God leading your own lives. But Satan also knows that he can build his character into the man, and that through opinion he changes our vision and then he gives us the vision of the world, so that now everybody wants to be what they have seen before. Nobody wants to take the inspiration of the dreams that they have within themselves to grow the world, or to make the world a better place, or perhaps to grow your own economies. But rather, you stay within in all the things that you have seen before, end up being in competition, and then you have to find a way to fight the competition. However, in the growing any economy, you would need new ideas that have not been tried, or the new ways that cannot be competed with yet. And that is how you expand, right until people jump in, and then they begin to balance you out. Then you grow out again and expand. Then they jump in to balance you out. Basically, that is how growth happens. However, we realize that when opinion sets in or Satan sets in, it leads us through the same path that everyone has gone through, as to keep us to be limited within the paradigm and to change the result that we were hoping to have made for our lives. So the value we end up coming out with is value that is not valued, and then we ourselves lose purpose for our own lives. So here's what the writer is trying to tell us all about the book of Job, and that is that there is a way to success. So I want you to read from Job chapter 28, 7 to 22, 23 to 28, and you will find these there. Now we deduce from the story that there is a science for making success, and Job proved this in his principles, method, and the results of his life. We also see that success is in respect to a law, in commitment to some definite principles. Job chapter 28 verse 28. Now success is the natural course of life granted in living a purposeful life. That is, being creative and productive is just second nature to our leading the principles of success. And so we also learn that the height of Job's achievement is merited by his eternal purpose, or his eternal goal, or his eternal dream. And lastly, we also learn that the absolute security of a man depends on his state of mind. That is where wisdom sits. And wisdom comes in abundance of anything that you desire or want in this life. For the just man falleth 7 times and riseth up again, but the wicked shall fall into mischief. So now, before we go, let us look at the cast of the whole story of Job. So God rules in our state of mind as either wisdom or Satan. And Job himself was a symbol of the temple, or the man, or the temple of God. Equally so, he is a temple of wisdom or the temple of Satan. So we are where God sits as either wisdom, or he sits as Satan, to rule in the outcomes of our lives. And then his family is also symbolic of the reflection of Job's own positive or personal character. So whatever Job accepts of the leadership of his temple, it derives some attitudes inside him that reflects what he is becoming. And those attitudes is what reflected in the well-being of his family. Those attitudes is what reflected in the well-being of his wife and his children. And so when we saw that his failure came, those attitudes equally resulted in the downfall and failure of his family. Now this part is representing angels and demons. How angels translate from the source of our inspiration to inherit the body or the temple in reflection or in obedience to the result or the outcome that is determined by God or wisdom. So in the final persons, or the final people in this cast, we see his friends, who are the symbols of opinions of society. Of course, the God of this world is Satan. And in this book, he stood as the opinions of society, or the God of fear, and the God that oppresses or shows authority. More suitably, shows authority. So thank you for watching. Thank you for staying with us. We want to share so much more with you. So please feel free to subscribe. And then don't forget to leave your comment. If you have any difficulties, we are always ready to lend you a helping hand. God bless you. Stay with us, grow with us, and achieve your highest dream with us.